This is the final presentation for the full stack pathway. So there's two teams here. There's full stack 1 and 2. There's one team that merged, and then another team. And then we actually have another session going on. So they're still working on their projects and their presentations will be later on. But I thought we'll have just a brief introduction, maybe Angus and then Jay. You guys can introduce yourselves.
I'm Angus McLeod. I've been working with Discourse and other open source software frameworks for about 7 years now. But now I started Pavilion, which is a workers cooperative that focuses on open source software frameworks, particularly Discourse, about 2 years ago. And we're doing pretty well.
Okay, I'm Jay Fassman. I've been a Discourse consultant for 5 years. I do installations and management and migrations, and I've also started doing some plug-in work. In a former life, I was a professor who taught teachers how to use computers in classrooms.
Awesome. But yeah, let's get started with team 1/2. And it looks like just Ryan is here representing the team.
Okay. So, hi, I'm Ryan. I will be representing full stack team 1 and 2. And our plugin was a Discourse reply voting plugin. So a little bit about the project management, and this was handled by Sean and Hannah. We used a variety of different tools to help us manage this project. That included using Zoom for meetings, GitHub for development and cooperation, and Discourse and Slack for communication. Here's a little glimpse of our plugin. As you can see, each of the different replies has up and down vote arrows. Eventually, the replies are sorted by how many upvotes or net upvotes or downvotes that it has. How we built this, ultimately, we came to divide our development into 3 different parts. So the front end side, the database, and the back end. Starting with the front end UI by Nien and Yikit. Their main role was creating the vote buttons that you saw for each of the replies, displaying the correct vote count, and then shading and deshading in the arrows whenever a user voted or if they changed their vote. Some challenges that they faced was getting data from the backend to display the vote count correctly. This also was re-rendering updated vote counts after the user had voted. There's also some issues with styling the icons that we used in each of the replies as SVGs and toggling classes in the class list. Another thing on the front end side was routing, mainly trying to get the information from the backend. So my main tasks for this were setting up the routes between the front end and the back end, basically just making sure that if I sent a request to the backend, I can get whatever information I needed. Next is the database portion of our plugin. This is something that I also handled. So this was mainly designing and setting up the database. So this involved talking with our backend team, seeing what kind of data do we want to store in the database, how do we want to format that data, and really what functions do we have built in for the backend team to use. I have worked with traditional databases using like SQL and stuff, but using the plugin store, we wanted to use the plugin store, which is something that I definitely had to adapt to in terms of like designing a database around and what we stored. And finally is the backend. So they had basically 2 different things that they had to set up. Firstly was the controller. So this was where a lot of our functions were done in the backend. So it would listen to requests from the front end and basically return, either the counts or like a specific vote from the database and basically process any information. So like if someone voted, it would process their information, package it in the correct way, and make sure that the database could accept that. And secondly was the routes. This was mainly just figuring out what kind of requests we wanted to use. So we used some GET requests, some POST requests, some delete requests, and really making sure that all these routes were directed to the correct actions in the backend controller. This was something completely new to most of us. We hadn't worked with a lot of these languages and a lot of these technologies. And so it was definitely a large learning curve for all of us. So here's just a random post that we have running on my local instance of Discourse. As you can see, there's like a bunch of replies here. So me as a user am able to upvote this as I please, to now re-click and see that it now removed my vote. If I say I upvoted it once, but then I decide, oh, I don't really like it anymore, so I'm gonna downvote it. So now it will change your vote to a downvote. And yeah, that is pretty much it.
Awesome.
Yeah, well done. The challenges that you face there are not easy to overcome. I'm curious if you Ryan, if you encountered the issue of using the existing routes in Discourse in order to send data back up and down, or you thought it's just definitely the best case to create your own routes. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's definitely something we didn't really think about. I think mainly because we were kind of started building it more as like almost a standalone thing, and so we didn't really think of like, oh, what does Discourse already have, especially since Discourse was pretty new to all of us.
I would say on the sorting, did you have a go at the post sorting problem as well, or you just didn't quite get to having a go at it even on the development side of things?
We did have one member who was assigned to do it, and then some personal reasons came up, so that they were no longer able to do that part of the project. So it just kind of fell to the wayside, as we just kind of continued development without it. Definitely something if we had more time to do.
It's extremely tricky, so I think that you probably made a good call on that front. Well, I guess one other question I had, did you consider the presence of the data in the JSON API for the post or the topic? So say if I wanted to get data about a post and I wanted to see what votes the post had, would that be present in the data about the post if I was just using the API?
We mainly focused, I guess, on the counts of each post. The only real request that we did was like making sending a put request in order to like update a vote. So we didn't really like, I guess, associate it with like a particular post. It was more each reply had its own post ID or reply ID that we used to identify it, and then that would just give you all the information.
So you put the data in the plugin store and rather than adding it to the serializer, is that what you're saying?
Yes, we didn't use the post SQL, I think is what Discourse uses. We just used plugin store because it was a little bit easier to understand.
Are you considering open sourcing this when you're done?
I think my team definitely wants to put this out. There's definitely some things that we still need to work out in terms of like feature wise to make sure that everything's clean. But I think, yeah, my team would definitely want this to be open source, I guess, as a plugin.
Fantastic. That's good to hear. I mean, it's there are some plugins out there that do similar things. So there's a Q&A plugin, which I built a few years ago that does something a little bit similar. It's not quite the same. It'd be good to have another plugin out there that does something like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, people, every now and again, you see people asking for a upvote, downvote plugin. So I think you could find some people who would be interested in using it. So that could be cool if you can get things wrapped up so that you feel like you'd be able to support it and feel okay about having people depend on it.
Yes, for sure.
The other thing I would say is that when you're looking at getting a job, so whether or not you're looking at working in Discourse or other frameworks like that. So if you want to get into, you want to go work for Google, or you want to go work for Twitter, or you want to work for, you want to have a career in the tech industry, having your own open source portfolio of work is a really important part of your professional resume. Building up your open source profile through doing this kind of work is actually very invaluable for a career in technology.
Okay, thank you, Jay and Angus, for taking the time to come and see the presentations and giving some really great feedback.